Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, I am Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. Today, it was an out and about. I was out visiting my sister. I just recently got home and I am bagged in that, but it was a beautiful visit. My sister has not been feeling too well in the past few years. It's been a while. It really has been. And, in those little ways that I can go over there and give her a little bit of hand, it helps her out so much. But at the same time, it isn't that little drummer girl kind of attitude when you feel like you don't have something to contribute. And, I'm happy to contribute because it makes me feel like I have value, right? It makes me feel like I matter. My sister is important to me. Yes, we butt heads, right? And sometimes we can be our worst enemies in that. And sometimes, like I said, we can butt heads and trip each other up. But in the end, right, you never deny your own because in the end, that's all you've got. And I tell you, I went over there today, and in that return, I had the most amazing dinner. I made Swiss steak for dinner tonight. We sat, we had a really nice conversation. I kind of piddled around her house a little bit to help her catch up on those little things that she's not able at this moment to catch up on. But it's in that optimism that things will get better. And it's in that presence, right? If that's all I can offer, I have this mentality that just my presence is enough to make things shine a little bit better, to make things feel a little bit better. And if it's no skin off of my back, you know, and I say that lightly, because I do understand that there are things going on in this world that rub each other wrong, that we often put good faith into something where, right, it's not reciprocal in any way. And because I am only human, right, that I believe that, I have shortcomings when it comes to picking up all the clues. So much in our day today, right? It's speaking to us. And you hear me talk all the time about, serendipities and breadcrumbs and coincidences and those things that go, wow, right? Like, how did that happen? Well, it was meant to happen. It's just in that moment for a change, you caught on to it, right? That you kind of picked something up. And so it's got to make you wonder how much of your day, how much of your interactions, experiences, conversations, those little gifts that kind of pop into my life here and there, like that $50 bill that I found at the most opportune time last week. You know, sometimes you gotta think, like, really, really, right? And I pick up so much more of that now than I ever used to. But I don't want to be that person in that safeguarding, guarding, right? In that keeping myself off to the side out of the fire of what somebody might say to me, or that rejection or dejection, or that in bad intent that is so out there. And if you're highly sensitive, if you are empathic, if you've got that hypervigilance in you, like, you can pick that up in the moment. You can't always know what that intent is or the reason behind it, but you can feel it, right? You can feel it, and it might kind of makes you wonder, like, why? What did I do? What did I say? Right? What makes me the bad guy in somebody else's life? But this is what goes on, right? Hello, Tammy. Hello, dear. This goes on for a lot of people and they don't recognize it, right? Because they're not paying attention, right? But we can't be so on the ball all the time. And because it's in the tug and war, they call it the light and the darkness, like it's a tug of war. So the moment you get something amazing happening across your path, then there is something that's out there that's going to come across your path to kind of trip you up in it. For myself, I like to look at those situations as challenges. Tonight, when I went to go live, right, it wouldn't let me go live, so I have to go backtrack into my channel analytics. I have to delete that live because I don't want people to be directed somewheres where I'm not at, right? And then come back in and try again. But there are people out there who just go, oh my goodness, it's not letting me go live tonight. And that's it, right? They just give up in it. And, for myself, I'm not that naturally that person who gives up. This is just the way that my parents brought their kids up. It's survival of the fittest, right? It's ride the waves. It's adapt and conquer. It's find a way. And it's one of the reasons why I feel suited for what I'm doing, because in what I'm doing, there is a lot of pushback, right? And that pushback isn't anything that a highly sensitive, right? That an empathic person, you know, wouldn't be comfortable with, right? Unfortunately, we are comfortable with it because it's something that we have experienced all our lives. But when things are off, off of that pattern where, oh my goodness, I didn't get kicked today. I didn't get tripped today. Oh my goodness, I found a $50 bill. Oh my goodness, there's an extra $100 that just got dropped into my bank account. Oh my goodness, I got to say hi to all my sisters today. What an amazing dinner. And you have to look at something like that is not the norm where everything is just running smoothly in your life, right? I always look at that as a setup for a trip up. Right? Because in my life, in those biggest trip ups in my life, in those sabotages, whether by somebody else or by myself, where you fall flat on your face, there is always those moments beforehand to put you in a state of everything is great. What a lucky girl I am, right? Life is wonderful. Now, I'm naturally an optimistic person. Um, I look back on that trait myself to wonder, you know, why that attitude dropped in my lap as a character of mine, especially in growing up in a dynamic family and having those trip ups in my life constantly. A lot of people would be put on the ground by that. And that's the truth, right? But it is in that attitude of, right, just get up, try again, do the littlest step that you can to show good faith that you mean well, that you have good intent, right? And it doesn't mean to cross the finish line, because if you are wiped, right, and you still have to show up at your very best, then that's what you've got to do, right? That's what you've got to do, because that's the example that we've set for ourselves, right? So that we can be the example for others that it can be done, right? But it is in that keeping that good attitude. And I believe that it did come up from growing up in a dynamic family and being that sensitive that I was naturally drawn to what made me feel better about my life, right? The person that I was, my idiosyncrasies, my weaknesses and faults, because we all have weaknesses and faults. And to find moments, not just every once in a while, but all the time, to kiss my own boo boo, right? Okay, this is terrible. For me, one of those rewards was food. We were talking about food yesterday on my live, right? But in that reward, punishment and reward, and I rewarded myself lots, right? For what I felt I had to endure. And I would reward myself in kindnesses to myself, and that promise to myself that I was going to create the best life for myself as I possibly could. I did that long before I ever woke up to any of these ideas. And that's the 100% truth. It was a human condition that I had, right? And it worked for me, and it works for me, and it has made this experience, which has been a roller coaster of sorts, an experience of sorts, an adventure of sorts, a curious adventure of sorts, and it has made the experience bearable, right? And they say what I'm doing is super difficult, and I get it. And especially, I was thinking about it today when I got up, in sharing that experience, right? Because I was on YouTube when I first started waking up to what the world was all about, and I'll never be able to figure it all out because it's so expansive. But in my own little world, there's enough to keep me busy for a few lifetimes, and that's the truth. But in that movement, I've been able to do for myself that good cheer, right? That good cheer. That's why I call it What's My Good Cheer, because it's always in that optimism, even in the difficult times, to trust, right? To believe. And, I woke up this morning with an insight, and, they pop, pop into me every once in a while. And it brings me to a conversation with myself and a realization in that. And in the realization of what I have been doing, because, it was in this saying, your purpose comes from your pain, you know. And I had a pretty painful upbringing. I had a pretty painful childhood, teenage years, adulthood. But we all do, don't we? We all do. We all have those experiences. But this was a personal experience to me, and it felt kind of targeted in that. And a lot of it was in my own self sabotage and in those coping mechanisms that made a bad situation even worse. And it hurt me emotionally and mentally. So when I first heard of this idea, your purpose comes from your pain, I just went straight back to that, right? Those difficulties, and delved into that so that I could help others going through and recover those experiences that they should have had, right? That I should have had in my life. But I've never allowed myself to miss any joy in my life because I purposely set out to treat myself in a way that felt like a reward. So there was always a treat, there was always an adventure, there was always a gift for me. And it made the boo boos feel better. It made what I struggled with feel worth it. So it kind of canceled out whatever the negative was. And that just seems to be the case in my life, coming from two extremes. It just makes sense in that. But is it possible that I misconstrued, that I made a boo-boo in my purpose comes from my pain? Was my pain really that experience that I grew up in? Or were those experiences actually gifts and lessons to prepare me for what I'm doing now? This is what I'm waking up to, right? I'm always waking up to these things that I get to munch on all the time. But I've been on this purpose from your pain for years now. And just looking at it as that one pain and nothing ever else came across my path to signal that there was any other pain. But there certainly was. And I had that realization today when I went back into it. My purpose from my pain is feeling unloved, feeling not cared for. And that is totally different than the physical, mental, and emotional abuse, right? That people go through. Complex trauma, they call it, right? These things that affect us for our entire lives. And I just attribute it to those topics. But the underlying reason was all based on love. So I got up this morning out of bed and I just delved into it. Not online or anything. Oh, actually, I did, right? I sat here with my coffee. I went into it a little bit, made a few notes. Then I went into the lessons, right? Because in the morning that I apply myself to taking in perspectives, taking in something that will help me or help somebody else along the line. And the topic came up. By who? Carl Jung. We talk about serendipities and breadcrumbs and coincidences. It was just like Carl Jung, who's been gone for 60s, over 60 years now, right? And it's somebody else's content, but they're using his work in the presentation of the content. And here he is talking about the exact same subject that I was delving into this morning. And I go, oh, really? Right? Am I that scaled in now? That technology And it's been going on, it goes on all the time. But it's not, it might have been always going on, but we're just noticing these things now because they're top of mind, right? They're top of mind. Like, I wouldn't have delved in the way that I did if I didn't wake up to this idea of, oh, could the pain be deeper than what I thought? Is there anything deeper than the pain of my youth? We'll just put it that way, right? And yes, right? It to me it just seemed like confirmation as to what I was delving into. And so I started taking more notes in the perspective I was in, Carl Jung's perspective, right? And so I delved in, took some notes, and after looking at the notes, and I said, oh, this will be a good topic of conversation tonight, right? We'll talk about grief in the relationships of love, right? Heartbreak. And I went, oh, that's so heavy, Sydney, right? Then I gave it some thought and I went, okay, well, maybe that won't be the topic of conversation tonight. And here I am yapping about it, which wasn't the intent, right? I just come in, the flow happens the way it flow happens again. Serendipities and coincidence and those breadcrumbs that come across my path, right? But I decided, because I do one post on Instagram every week in the moment, right? That this topic would be my Instagram post, because I've got to write, right? Something for my Instagram post. And because I had written down all these notes, I decided to do a collaboration with Carl Jung on the topic of heartbreak. Pretty incredible to have a realization that is it possible that my purpose is in healing the heart, in because I come from dynamic relationships. It doesn't mean that I'm not delving into the topics of complex trauma and different personalities and stuff, because you guys know I come from a dynamic family, right? It's still pertinent to the conversation, and it's what got me to the point of consistently and overtly by myself and others, because there's a lot of sabotage in that. Because when you are hurt in your gift of love, right? Because it is a gift. When you're hurt consistently in that gift of love, it can break you. It most definitely can break you. Love, I am grateful, has come across my path, in different ways, starting with that relationship with my father, but the relationship with my sisters, relationships with my friends, and those few men that have come across my path, whether they were friends or lovers or eventually husbands, right? The pain of the breakup, because obviously they're not in my life now. And even though on my side, and I'm sure on their side as well, there wouldn't be any hard feelings, because it's in that idea of that was a part of my life, right? That was an important part of my life, to be able to give that gift and to be able to be the recipient and the receiver in that gift. But in the end, that heartbreak is there, that grief is there, right? And you know, it was always important for me to revere the good memories, the good feelings. I didn't ever want to look back on any one of those relationships, right? Whether it was family or friends or coworkers or, whoever it was that was in my life. And we're going to send some good cheer that when they knock on the door, they're at our building, when they knock on their door, that it is going to be a false alarm. They could turn around and go right back to the station. And I'm just looking out the window. It looks like it's about to rain any minute. My sister is walking home at this moment. She lives far. I take that walk to her house every once in a while. It's a pretty long walk. It's a lovely walk, but I walk a whole lot more than she does, and she's going to get stuck in a rainstorm. It looks like crazy weather. We got some serious. I'm just going to take a break from the heavy subject. Crazy weather going on in this province that I live in. But when I'm looking at the weather, right, I see that quite a few of the provinces and states have got some crazy weather going on. I heard that heat wave that hit Europe is heading to the States next week. I looked at our weather channel. Our weather seems to be normal to the most extent, right? But yeah, we have some serious flooding going on, and this rain that we're getting today and tonight, and it was supposed to rain all day today, barely spit. I even walked home, and I walked from another part of the city too. It was a really nice walk, nice breeze. It was a nice night to walk, but and not wanting to lose track there. I was just losing track. I lost track there. I'm going to come into the comments for a little bit, see if I can get readjusted onto this topic that I was inspired to talk about. Okay, I hear you, Cindy. It happens to me a lot, like you. But you and I always see the good things and we never give up. We keep going, we do our best. That's the idea, right? That's evolution. Like God or whoever or whatever, that's what they want, or he wants, or she wants, or it wants, right? Is to have people who want to move forward, right? And so a lot of these challenges that we get in our life, I believe it's just to show, right? To express in that fortitude, that resistance, that resilience, the determination, right? And the desperation to just keep going. And when you do that, I feel, because I feel it in my own life, that wisp of air, that little push, that little helping hand, that $50 bill lying on the ground, whatever it is that you might need in the moment, that somehow it is resourced, right? That it is resourced. And that's the evidence for us. And that should make it so that we feel calmer in any situation, right? Life sucks sometimes. It does, right? But it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. So even when things are going badly, right? When it's a sad moment or a frustrating moment, you could always find the humor, right? You can always find a way to smile, if only to make somebody else feel better. And in making somebody else feel better, it makes you feel better because you're that person where your self worth comes from what other people feel about you, right? We can all be tough birds. We're gonna say we don't care, right? What so and so says. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Really? Really? I am constantly reminded of my vulnerability, but it is in only those traits. I hear them, Tammy. Gonna send some good cheer. You're at your destination, knock on that door, let it be a false alarm, right? Let everything be okay, and you'll be back on your next call or back at the station in any moment, right? But it is in that never giving up and doing the best that you can and putting one foot in front of another, right? And doing it with an attitude of expectation that everything is going to work out fine. It doesn't always, right, work out the way we want to, right? Sometimes it doesn't work out perfectly, but I think and I believe that it works out the way it's supposed to work out in the end. Yeah, that's the truth. Um, Come down here. I learned a lot of things in my own with the good attitudes and never give up, be an overcomer, being the best that I can, etc. I didn't receive that from your parents. That's amazing. I don't know if you picked that up as being a spectator and a student living vicariously through other people's lives. Could it have been that you were born that way, or in that need to make everything safe in your life that it was kind of built into you? I'd be curious to know, like, how can you, right? Because I never picked these things up as a child. Yes, I had optimism, but if I didn't have optimism, it would be it would be ground floor for me, right? And so I felt I didn't have a choice. And because there were moments and adventures and experiences in my life that were way up there, right? Whether they were experiences offered, like I said, my dad was an adventurer. He took us on lots of adventures with them. He was a very kind man. He was my he was my friend as well as my father. He was a companion for me, and he was somebody who made me feel like I mattered, right? So that could have been the feed for me. I'm pretty certain it would have had to have been the feed for me to recognize that I had to make these moments for my life. Or, sorry, I had to make up these moments for myself, is what I meant to say. And I just kind of grew into it. But I had examples. Like I said, my father was that example for me, and but I did take the good from both sides, from both ends of my family. And sometimes in that negative, it just being around, it kind of rubs off on us, right? And that's the work that you do when you wake up and understand the doo-doo that you kind of stepped into, right? But to be able to recognize that so young without having examples in your life, I'd be curious to know, right? I believe that people are born that way and then are uh, sheep herded into a different aspect of personality. I believe that to be true. I truly believe that's how narcissists are created, and you guys know that I believe that, other parts of me are coming back. Cindy's not coming back. This is Cindy's one shot at creating the best life for herself as I possibly can. But I'm also grateful to be privileged with those other parts of me and, you know, the experience that I've had, even not understanding, not properly picking up on every single cue that comes across my path, that I have that faith and I have that trust and that belief that it's all for greater good. It's moving the way that it's supposed to. There is a plan. And whether or not I am privy to that plan, I'm still responsible in the creation of the best life that I possibly can, right? So I just keep chugging along and trying to make the best choices for myself, knowing that I am imperfect in that and that I make mistakes and that I might have possibly made a big mistake in what my purpose truly was, that it was actually in that missing aspect in my life that may have not been part of that full cup, that I've been filling that cup up with something other than what I should have been. It's an idea. It's not a fact. It's something I kind of jumped into and chewed on today. But also, in being a collaboration, right? I got 3 pages of notes that got to be transcribed into a post for my Instagram tomorrow, all on the topic of heartbreak because, you know, there was a lot of heartbreak in my life. Who wants to grow up feeling that they're not cared for, right? That they're not valued, that they're not loved, and to be betrayed by my perspective, maybe not by theirs, but in my own perspective, that I felt that I was betrayed in those breakups and in those griefs. That if I had had a choice, right, I would have made a different choice. But a lot of choices that come into our lives are are um, dictated or created by another party, and we don't have any choice, right? We only have responsibility for our own actions, our own thoughts, and our own emotions. So if we've got to ride those waves, if we have to adapt and conquer, right? And if we crash down to the lowest of the lows, then, when it says, your purpose comes from your pain, you're just taking the pain as the purpose, not the reason for the pain. Does that make any sense? Right? So, I feel bad in that because possibly there was a lot in the way of blame game, you know, being hurt. We sometimes don't want to hold on to that pain. We want to drop it off in somebody else's lap or make it somebody else's problem or make it somebody else's fault because it's too painful for us to hold on to. I have been loved in my life and I have loved in my life, but those relationships are not fully whole in my life, right? There is care in that. There is responsibility in being, a part of somebody's life, right? In that caregivership. But to actually feel that you're somebody's be all to end all, and to trust that that's the way it is, right? That somebody is never going to hurt you or betray you. That relationship is going to be there forever. To find out that, right, something that you loved might not have loved you back the way you thought, right? And then feel betrayed in that, and not look at our responsibilities until after that relationship is done with. But in that token and in that optimistic idea, I always wanted people to remember the best part of those relationships that we had. Because I would have to say, we all grow apart from each other. It's just the natural course of life. If one person is growing and the other one is just quite comfortable, right? If somebody goes off and gets married and has babies and the other one doesn't, right? So there's a natural course of separation, but that doesn't make anybody the bad guy in that. But does it make the heartbreak any easier, right? No, it doesn't. It's just how we label it, whose lap it falls in, who's to blame, right? And these are things that we don't even look at until it's too late, right? So I kind of delved into the topic of heartbreak because it's by my example, and this is my experience when it comes to heartbreak because I was born into it, right? But it's not that love never entered my life. It just never grew forever roots. That's the idea, right? And it's an idea that is worthy of a post, right? I didn't think I was going to talk about it tonight in any way. I didn't delve in super deep, considering, what I wrote here, but just the gist of it. But all I was going to do tonight was come in and just grab a card, and we were just going to fly on the topic of whatever the card said tonight. But the flow goes where the flow goes, right? And I have to ride those waves and I have to join in because, above all else, I am my own best partner. And, when it comes to heartbreak and betrayal, that is something that I don't have to worry about within myself, but it's in those, right, dynamic relationships that we have that we feel that we're missing out if that love is not reciprocated in any way, right? That's life sometimes, right? We could go back 100 years where divorce was, right? It wasn't even a choice. Like you picked your partner and that was your partner till one or both of you passed away. Now it's so easy, right, for somebody saying, "Oh my goodness, your socks stink. I'm done with you. You're out of here." Right? Not even giving somebody a chance to learn how to keep clean socks in the drawer or on their feet. That was just the first thing that came to my mind. But it could have been anything. It could be anything. One mistake and then we just rate somebody off. And it was just a moment, right, that somebody was having. And, you know, somebody just looks at that like, oh, that's my out. I am out of here, right? It's a different age now, right? Like, back in the 50s and 60s, when it was time for you to to get married. It was the fact that you were ready to be sexually active, right? And you had to be married for that. You weren't supposed to be doing these things when you weren't married. So again, you would pick your partner and that was your partner for life. But nowadays it works so differently. And by the time people hit 20 years old, they've already had like 30 boyfriends, right? And who's to say how many husbands afterwards, right? So, in those relationships, it's important to treasure the memories because if you've gone through all of those and they've broken your heart in every single one, or you've broken hearts in so many of those, that you want to have good memories, good thoughts, right? Good feelings towards those relationships that got to the point that you wanted to actually commit and actually say those words, I love you, right? And, you know, it's important to find partners, to take our time to find our partners and not just because somebody has hurt us in the moment, just say, oh my goodness, I can't bear this anymore. I'm so heartbroken. And the next day you're with boyfriend number 18 and you're only 18, right? How many heartbreaks can you take, right? I think in my entire life, 13, 14 men in my life, that's a lot still, right? But I came from an era, we were clubbers, right? I worked in a nightclub for over a decade. It was in the group that I was hanging out with. We are who we surround ourselves with. And it was in that not feeling good, right? And not being able to say no, right? As a highly sensitive, as somebody who was empathic, it was so difficult for me to say no. And I was very lucky that the perfect guy came across my path that I was able to delve into my very first, right? And well, I'm not going to say last relationship, but my last important relationship in my life. And it was a good one, and it would break my heart if he, right? It breaks your heart to have that relationship end. And yet you're going to continuously break each other's hearts by hearing the bad things that they're saying about you or them flashing boyfriends or girlfriends or second wives at you, right? And the opposite with the men, right? But but you know, for them to think the very best of you whenever they throw a thought your way, because they will throw a thought your way, 100%, right? Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why I got into that conversation tonight, because it was a post. I don't know if it's even going to fit in an Instagram post because it's 3 pages long. I don't want to condense it because it's all relevant. So it might go into YouTube post. I don't know. It might not even be post. I might post something totally different. But I was in it today, and it's something for me to delve into a little bit deeper. I didn't have that time today. I had a little bit of time in the morning, and so I slotted it in. I took my notes, I wrote my post, I took in a little bit of Carl Jung, but today was a day to spend with my family. So that's what I did today. And I guess in the little bit of recapping of my morning, I kind of recapped it here, right? Because it was a thought when I finished doing the work to say, oh, that would be a good topic for conversation tonight, right? In that heartbreak, right? We talk about love all the time. You know, there are the country songs that, tell stories of heartbreak and stuff. But, to really delve into it, to understand the ins and outs of it, right? We only have the blame games. We only have the broken heart. We only have the tears, right? We only have the revenge or the tit for tat and the, right? The jealousy, maybe resentment too. But we don't delve into it really at looking at the true lessons, right? We're just looking at the relationship itself, but not delving into the whys of it and the gifts of heartbreak, because there's serious gifts in that too. And, you know, I don't believe I'd be the person I am right now without all those amazing relationships in my life, because even though they weren't forever, they were filled with love 100%, right? For the time that we were in those relationships, we were in them. And when we were out of them, I'm grateful to say that, I know it's not reasonable to think that everybody can have good thoughts, especially when there's money and cars and houses and children involved, right? But in the end, it's beneficial because it doesn't sour you from trying again, to actually thinking possibly that there is somebody out there for you, or that broken relationship, right, that did hurt you could be repaired, right? Lots of times we don't look at the investment, right? It's just like, oh, you want to break up? Oh, okay. See you on the beach. And that was part of my idea in the beginning, because that's how I dealt with that pain. There was no second chance. For me, it was kind of impossible. To me, it just felt like betrayal because I had everything invested in it. But that's what we do when we're highly sensitive, right? We throw our trust and our faith and our belief into something beautiful and forever. But it's not always there, and it doesn't always work out that way. And we are devastated by it. But if we can look at it in the lessons of that relationship, and the lessons in that breakup, and the lessons in the opportunities because of it, right? It could be a totally different story. It could wake you up into wishing something better for yourself. It's a lesson for me too, right? My marriage ended, oh, over 25 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, right? And I have dated, right? But I haven't had a relationship with anybody since, because I was hurt by it, right? And I had invested a lot in it. And there are lessons in that make me recognize that maybe, right, my purpose might be in that aspect of relationships, and having my heart broken and giving it another shot, right? And yeah, it's something to look into. We'll check it out over the course of the next couple of days and see if there's anything in that for me. I'm just going to come in here. Uh, I learned a lot of things on my own with the good attitudes. Oh yeah, I got that one already. I can only, I can truly relate to you, Cindy, with heartbreak and feeling unloved and grief. I can relate throughout the years of my life as a kid and as an adult, right? So, it seems odd if that was the underlying true reason of it all, because it would make everything that I went through outside of that only system. What do you call that? A symptom, right? Of what the underlying reason was. Yeah, something to delve into. But I have a lot invested on that. But it's still all relatable. They're all like, even if they're symptoms, right? To be able to resolve them, right? Because there's always, right? There's symptoms. They're not the cause. But if you're actually going to work on the cause, lots of times the symptoms just kind of disappear, don't they? And wouldn't it be, I'm going to say, funny that I have been struggling with things that I didn't need to struggle in, because in actuality, they were only symptoms of the true purpose in my pain. Oh my goodness. Or pain, right? Which is supposed to be my purpose. Wouldn't make it that I was going in the wrong direction. It would only mean I'd have to add a little bit more into my life than what I'm adding into. Be willing is so important in what I'm doing, right? Am I opposed to a new relationship? No. Am I pursuing it? No. Am I giving it any thought? No. Right? So maybe it's something I should be giving thought to, right? I'm not sure if I would be uncomfortable in living the rest of my life on my own. I'm not sure if I would be uncomfortable in that, to tell you the truth, because I've been surrounded my entire life, right? Like, always, I've never had that time or space that was just mine for whatever I wanted to do with it, whatever I wanted to create in that, whatever I wanted to think in that, or move in that. And I have that opportunity. And because I am that kind of strange bird because of what I do, it'd be kind of hard to find a matching kind of strange bird that would suit me as well. But like I said, it's about being willing, right? Okay. I know, Cindy, I'm married for life for my first marriage till death to us part, but my ex husband made the choice and didn't want me or love me, etc. Well, I said, okay, then I was married. You were married 16 years. That's a big investment, Tammy. Big investment. And children were his too. I'm going to assume your children were his also. But yeah, that is the stuff, right? Because that's heartbreak. We taking that into that's heart, right? And you want to give up in that, and because it breaks us mentally, like totally breaks us mentally and emotionally in that we're not even thinking straight. And when the pain is so devastating, we can become hesitant to step into it again, which kind of makes me very proud of you, Tammy, that after a couple of years that you did, you know, find love again. I think that's absolutely amazing that you were able to give, right, marriage another shot, right? I didn't go down that route, right? I didn't want to be broken like that again. It was so hard for me to crawl out of that bucket after my marriage fell apart. It took me years, like years before I didn't even think of him every day, right? And I even back then I didn't hold any grudge in it, and there was some freedom in that. Again, I just delved into creating my best life. And again, I wouldn't be sitting here right now without that experience, right? I dreamed of my Prince Charming and my Cinderella wedding, right? And I got it. Problem was, I didn't wish for happily ever after in that, right? For something to last forever. But that's life and that's change. And like you said, those are choices that sometimes we don't make, but we have to accept it. We have to adapt and conquer and ride those waves the very best that we can. And the idea is with talking, crying, and some time that eventually we get better. I still throw my husband a thought here and there because when that marriage was good, that marriage was good, and um, we had issues in that marriage, but it was something that was kind of outside of both of our control, right? And I wanted him to have the best life for himself as he possibly could, as much as I was giving my same wish for myself. And who wants to be around somebody who doesn't want to be with you, right? My husband just wanted to keep me as the side chick. He did everything he could to make it so I didn't leave and come back to Manitoba. But I couldn't be around that. The pain was too much. I did not want to be in that experience. It was, for me, all or nothing, right? And there are species out there that are like that, right? The Canadian geese, wolves, ducks. Uh, what other ones I'm thinking of that they just stay forever, right? And lots of species are in those magnanimous monogamous relationships. And that's the truth. And I felt that way. But again, being a child of the 60s and 70s, all little girls dreamed of that, didn't they? Right? And when your expectations are crushed, we're crushed. It's just of what are we taking out of that experience, right? You're gonna never try again, never be willing, right? That's it for me. Or do you search it out? Do you fill that void in yourself with whatever comes across your path just because it's such a void, such a pain in your life that you can't bear it? So you just need somebody to fill up that space, just to find somebody else to do the exact same thing to you that the last one did. But this one never ever cared for you the way or you never cared for them. It was just somebody to fill up that hole, right? I've done that too. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Let me go. You can do it, Cindy. I think you should Instagram it. Okay. Maybe I will. Um, yes, 5 years. You had three of them. Yes, 5 years after I remarried. It shocked me too, Cindy. I didn't expect to remarry at all, but things worked out, and I ended up caregiving for my family. Oh my goodness. Doves. Oh, really? Doves are monogamous too. I didn't know that one. That's a good one to know. I'm just trying to think in the wild kingdom what other animals are like that. But those are the few that I can think of right off the hop. So it does happen, right? The geese, if they lose their mate, they usually die too from their broken heart, right? And even though they'll mate with other geese, they never take them on as mates and partners because they only have one. Yeah, curious, interesting. Okay, you guys, I'm going to leave it at that tonight. I did have a date today. I'm babbling now, right? But that's the way it goes sometimes. We always pick a card at the end of my live. I was thinking tonight I was going to pick a card at the beginning of my live show, and then just whatever popped up, that's what we were going to talk about in that first perspective that came across my brain. But that's not the way it works out. And you guys know I ride the waves, I adapt and conquer, and I work with what comes across my path. And that's the way it came across my path. So we're going to pick a card. Sometimes it's relevant to the conversation, sometimes it's not. We'll just go on something else for a couple minutes. Movement is an action that gravitates to the result. And that's the truth. What are we talking about? In being able to put one foot in front of another, just trusting that everything is going to work out just fine. It might not work out the way that you expected, but you're making choices, and every choice that you make is going to dictate some form of change, right? Change. What came into my mind is that those links, right? And you can switch those links up by making a different choice, and it's going to make it so that the experience is going to be different, right, than what you expected. You're given a roadmap and you follow that roadmap to get you from point A to point B. Maybe it will work. Most likely it won't, because there are little wrenches and hiccups and serendipities and conversations and little catastrophes that come across our path that force us into making a decision. And in that decision, it changes things. And we have to be able to change in that too. That's part of the adapt and conquer, ride the waves, never give up, right? But it just makes it so the landscape is going to look a little bit different in that movement, right? Movement is an action that gravitates to the result, right? Sometimes we don't know what that result is. We can set our goals and dreams, but in those choices that we make, experiences happen. We change in those experiences, and sometimes we find that we're somewhere else. But if you don't like where you are, what can you do? You can make another choice, right? Because every single choice creates change, right? And if you want it to go in a direction, you have to be moving in that direction, right? You have to be moving in that direction. That doesn't mean you're going to hit that destination, right? It happens. It happens often in setting your goals. But there are lots of trip ups, lots of experiences, lots of failures in that. But it's the gravitate, right? That's your destination. That destination is pulling you to, right? Follow me, right? And you have to follow that follow me, those serendipities, right? Those breadcrumbs, those little gifts that come across your path. And you just put one step foot in front of another, and eventually, right, you'll get to the result. Might not be the destination that you were thinking you were going to get to, but it was where you were supposed to be. And that's the idea, right? In that never giving up. There's a plan, right? We are not always privy to what that plan is, but it's our responsibility to pay attention to the clues, to trust, right? In those emotions that say, follow me, and give it a shot and see where it leads you, right? It just might lead you to husband number two. Okay, or three or four, or five or six. It's the world we live in, right? Okay, you guys, that's going to be my good cheer tonight. I am done. My day is done. My voice is done. And so I'm going to just go wash my face, get in my pajamas, and I'll be back tomorrow. You guys have a great night.